Welcome to the Broncos podcast with Troy Rink. I am your host, Troy Rink from the Denver Post. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your weekend. It's Friday. We're here. The weather's cooled. Finally starting to feel a little bit like fall. And you know, I love it because it's starting to feel like football. Football weather. And man, I don't know if I should say this, but in week 3, the Broncos, yes, you can say it out loud, have a monstrous game at the Chargers. And I know you're shaking your head. It's week 3. You lose this game, folks, you're 3 games back in the division because you would be 1-2 and you would lose the tiebreaker to the Chargers. So this is a huge game, and it's a huge bounce back game for a team that talked all offseason, led by their coach, about how they could contend and be a Super Bowl type team. You got to win games like this because you just gave one away against the Colts. You got to win a game like this. Can you make a statement on the road where the Broncos have only won once ever at SoFi? You win this game, the narrative changes. Lose it, feels like you're chasing ghosts and lightning bolts for the next few months. But we're going to break all this down with Luca Evans. He and I will be in Los Angeles with Parker Gabriel, watching this game unfold. Can the Broncos kind of start living up to all the offseason hype? And it starts with a huge game Sunday against the Chargers. We're going to break it down right after this. Well, if you've been injured in a car wreck or hurt at work, what are you waiting for? Give my friends at Hoggatt Injury Law a call. Their motto with us, it's personal. That's because it is. I've known Darby Hoggatt forever. We became good friends. Many of his clients became his good friends. You don't even have to pay Darby up front. If your case goes as planned, Darby will be the one writing checks to you. You can see that number on the screen. If you need a lawyer, an injury lawyer, give that number a call. 1-833-464-4288 or 1-833-HOGGATT, or visit the website at hoggattlaw.com. Welcome back to the Broncos podcast with Troy Rink. I'm your host, Troy Rink, columnist for the Denver Post. Please read all my stuff there in the Post. I wrote about Jared Bednar earlier this week, and this current column that's out this morning is on just this. Broncos defense looks, should I say, overrated? It's a little early for that, but they looked ordinary as hell against the Colts. So let's bring on Luca Evans to break some of this down. Because part of the reason they looked ordinary is, and Luca broke this down in a story and different tweets and social media, they could not cover they could not cover Tyler Warren or Jonathan Taylor to save their life. Luca, we're going to get into that. But first, how you doing? You get to go back to LA. You went to Chapman. This has got to be a fun week for you on the NFL beat, returning to Southern Cal.
It is, yeah. I get to, crash at a buddy's place. Just couch surfing, living the good life. But yeah, no, it's awesome. I love LA. We'll see how much the Broncos love it. This is a tough. This Chargers team is, right now firing on all cylinders. I think Vance Joseph said this yesterday, but he feels like Justin Herbert's the MVP through 2 weeks, and he's playing at a level that's, we've seen him the last 5 years, and it just seems like he's hit a new high right now. So shoot, you're right. This is a pretty monstrous game, going into week 3.
Yeah, it shouldn't be, because they should be 2-0 and they should have room to lose this game, but they gave one away against the Colts.
Unfortunately, no leverage. No leverage.
I don't know what Darren Rizzi was talking about yesterday. I mean, I get he's kind of taking pot shots back at the Colts guy, saying the Colts guy had figured him out, and he's like, we've never run this play. Here's the thing, Rizzi. Don't run that play. It's a 60-yarder with a guy who was pissing down his leg when he walked out and stood on the logo. He looked like the Tennessee kicker against Georgia. Like, his eyes were saucers. Why are we trying to block that? I mean, I digress. I do want to get into something more specific to this week because it's pertinent to their offseason. It's all tied in. Part of the reason, Luca, and you joined the beat in March, part of the reason for the optimism that this Broncos team could go from 10 wins to a legitimate threat to win the AFC West were their offseason additions, where they addressed specific needs with Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, Evan Ingram, and then late in June, J.K. Dobbins. We all said this Rudyard Kipling poem, if healthy. Well, Greenlaw hasn't played, and now Ingram doesn't look like he's playing. Where does it stand with those two? And then I'll dig into a little bit more on Greenlaw. But What is going on? What's the latest on Greenlaw and Ingram? Should we expect to see either, both, neither against the Chargers?
Yeah, I mean, I think as a quartet last year, this trio played, 18 plus 31 games combined last year. When you look at Talanoa Hufanga, Dre Greenlaw, Evan Ingram, J.K. Dobbins, the four kind of most important free agent veteran additions. And so, Denver obviously swung on a few of them, and knowing that they needed upgrades at a few positions. And so far, Hufanga and Dobbins have been really steady guys. They've hit on two of them. But Evan Ingram, for all kind of the Joker talk throughout this offseason and his arrival in Denver, I think you have to give him a little bit of the benefit of the doubt through 2 weeks because, first game, obviously muddled up by that quad injury. Second game, we don't really know. He's got a back thing right now. We don't really know when that was sustained, but he's only played about 40% of the snaps through 2 weeks. And he was he's been a 70% snap guy throughout his career. So it's really, it's confusing kind of irrespective of the injuries. They come out in week 1 and Lucas Kroll is out there, not Evan Ingram. And Evan Ingram plays, I think, 1 snap on the first offensive series. So it's, I don't think we haven't really heard the plan for him yet. But obviously, hasn't played so far this week in practice. Looks pretty doubtful for Sunday, the way that's tracking. And then Dre Greenlaw, I'd just say that he's highly, highly doubtful at this point to play Sunday as well. And then that gets into really dicey territory because he's got to come back in week 4 against the Bengals, or you're sitting here saying, why didn't they put him on IR? Because they're wasting a roster spot through 4 weeks at that point that could be used elsewhere. So Sean Payton essentially said this week, he's not commenting much on injuries at this point beyond what's in the injury report. But he essentially described the time frame for Greenlaw's injury as nebulous, and you never want to hear anyone in a position of importance describe a player's injury or a time frame as nebulous. But I think from everything I know and just within Greenlaw's camp, they've been on the same page with the Broncos so far. They've really slow played this. It's been about essentially kind of holding him back a little bit, and I think they're playing the long game with him. The question is just when ultimately we see him, because you thought things were shifting. He was limited in practice last Friday, and so that theoretically looked like a step forward, and then all of a sudden he's back to DNPs this week in practice. So like Sean Payton said, nebulous with that one.
Yeah, I don't like that word. I talked to a source last night about it, just try to get a better read, and it said very similar to what you're saying, that they are playing the long game. They are on the same page. I believe, this is just my own skepticism, having done this job for 30, 35 years now. Somewhere between the last preseason game and the first regular season game, there was either a setback or the timeline shifted, because we all thought that he could have played in one of those last 2 preseason games.
Yep.
So to go from that to not practicing, to me, it suggests something happened. Now, they don't have to be honest about that as long as it's the same injury.
Yeah.
As long as it's the quad, it's the quad. And you can have setbacks in rehab. So that protects them, because it's not like they're covering for an injury. He's been on the injury report. It's been a quad. It just feels like something happened there. Maybe when he ramped it up, he didn't feel right. But damn, don't they need him, Luca? I mean, that was and we all like Singleton and Justin Strnad. I mean, if you put an all-interview team together, those guys are first-team All-Pro. But they just don't have the strength of coverage. That's not their strength. And Singleton's coming off ACL surgery. Greenlaw specifically, I mean, they could kind of live without Ingram as he gains traction, but Greenlaw addressed such a specific need, Luca.
Yeah, absolutely. When you look back at the last time he was healthy in 23, I think he was next gen stats. He was first in the league among all linebackers, and essentially completions in coverage expected against them. He's he plays sideline to sideline. You know, he's a former DB in high school and in college. Like, he's so physical. And he's the exact kind of weapon. Like, you look at what Tyler Warren did to them last week. You look at what Jonathan Taylor did to them out of the backfield. Like, he has the size to compete with, you know, sort of the Joker tight end that you know, is now kind of ironically becoming a problem for Sean Payton's Broncos. And he has the speed to keep up with, you know, like, he's every linebacker is going to get burned in coverage, you know, but the degree to which it's happening this consistently. You look back at last year with the Chargers. I went back and looked at this. In the 2 losses to them last year, they completed every single pass that they targeted the Broncos starting linebackers in coverage. And that was some degree of, you know, Justin Strnad and Cody Barton and what have you. So,
And wasn't that number, Luca, like 17 for 17?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
it's something like that. Small sample size.
No, it's not a small.
4 for 4 here.
Yep. And the Colts, that's a primary, you know, they were 6 for 6, I think, for 120, 126 yards against Singleton and in Strnad. And, you know, the question is really kind of what you do without Greenlaw, because there's no easy answer for Vance Joseph. It's, do you make a personnel shift? Well, Alex Singleton wears the green dot. Justin Strnad has actually been really effective in, you know, as a blitzer and in non-coverage situations. Do you throw Lavelle Bailey out there, who's played 7 snaps in his NFL career, and hope that, you know, he can make a change? Do you throw Kareni Reed out there, who's an undrafted rookie? Like, no easy personnel, you know, kind of fix there. The question is, and I almost thought we'd see a little bit more of Jahdae Barron in week 2 to try and kind of, you know, how versatile he is, kind of try and check Tyler Warren a little bit more. And they obviously put Pat Surtain in that role. You can't do that. You can't afford to do that against the Chargers, because they have Ladd McConkey, Keenan Allen, Quentin Johnston is kind of breaking out right now. You know, they can't afford to come down and, you know, throw Pat Surtain on Tyler Conklin or whomever it is. So this is going to be, I think, a really interesting game to, you know, figure out what on earth Vance Joseph does with his personnel and his matchups against Los Angeles.
And that's what we're going to break down after the break. How can this defense rebound? Because, folks, I know you say it's small sample size, but they give up 236 yards passing to Daniel Jones in the first half. Like, there's hiccups and there's like, yikes, like what the heck's going on? And I get Shane Steichen was in his bag and a guy got hot, but can the Broncos D bounce back? We're going to look into more of that when I talk with Luca Evans after the break. When you face curveballs from family challenges, divorce, legal separation, child support, alimony, custody, you need a lawyer who understands the human dynamics, the courtroom, and is willing to fight for your rights. You need Ted Shih. He's a graduate of Cal Berkeley Law. Ted brings 40 years of courtroom experience, 20 years of family law experience to your corner. Ted's been a social worker, police detective. First and foremost, though, he's a trial lawyer. He has tried cases across the country and state. He's taught young lawyers across the country the ins and outs of the courtroom for the National Institute of Trial Advocacy. Martindale Hubbell ranks Ted among the top lawyers in this country. So you want an expert to navigate your family challenge? Call Ted. His passion is putting you first. He will work to settle your case if possible, but he's not afraid to go toe-to-toe in the courtroom. Ted can be reached at theoshih@aol.com, TheoShih, or give him a call at 303-475-2981. That's 303-475-2981. Ted promises to respond to your concerns within 24 hours, 365 days a year. All right, welcome back to the pod. I bring back in Luca Evans, my colleague from the Denver Post. If you're not reading Luca in the Post, you're doing it wrong. He and Parker Gabriel are just amazing, the amount of coverage they give you. And we're not even really going to touch on the stadium issue today, but they've been on top of the stadium issue with Parker's work and Luca complimenting that work, and then just the everyday grind of it. I'm just a piece of that as a columnist. But again, I don't know where you'd want to go elsewhere to find info in terms of, and it's just not that, it's the style of writing, the quality of writing. That's why I came to the Post years ago, is like, I want to read stuff that I wished I could write. And that's what Luca and Parker deliver on a daily basis. But they can get into the weeds too, which you have to as a beat writer. You can't just be a feature guy. You got to be able to get into the weeds. And that's where we're next, Luca, as we bring you back in. How does the Broncos D rebound? I talked to several former Broncos players, some that played for Vance Joseph yesterday, multiple phone calls, trying to get a read, guys who watched the film of the first two games. And it wasn't a conclusion. Some of it was more of my conclusion, but I think, this is my opinion, a little bit more of the Vic Fangio, less Wade Phillips this week. Play maybe some too high, some shell, play zone, keep the ball in front, and tackle well in space. Because when you blitz, and blitzing is people like Vance Joseph, he blitzes all the time. I just want to tell people this about blitzing. And Wade Phillips used to clarify this to me when I covered him back in the day in 15. If you send 5, it's technically a blitz. But that they still have usually 5-on-5. Yeah. Of true blitz that people are thinking about, it's Mad Dog, where you're sending 6 or 7 and you're in 0 coverage behind. Broncos weren't doing a lot of that, Luca, at Indy. It was more of a 5 blitz and they weren't winning one-on-ones. And so if you're not, to me, I think that you got to really look, because the Colts and Chargers look a lot similar to me on paper, the way they play, physical. And if you don't think you're going to get home, I don't mind them giving up yards in between the 20s. So maybe play a little more matchup zone, a little more cover 3 if you need to. What do you think the answer is? Because Surtain might have to take out Johnson, and then all of a sudden, if you're playing a lot of man, Jaquan McMillan's going to be the key to the game, the guy you drafted to lose his job with Jahdae Barron. Like, now we're in week 3, and we're going to say, Jaquan, go win it. Now, he played decent against the Colts, but where do you see the answers? Again, my answer is play a little more zone, keep the ball in front of you, and then be nails in the red zone, which, frankly, they were pretty good in the red zone in the second half last week.
Yeah, I think I think Colts were 2 of 6 overall in the red zone last week. But I think my answer is pretty similar to yours in that, went back and looked through things. Chargers are as good as any team in the league right now in handling the blitz. I think Justin Herbert is his stats have been unreal in any situation, but he's particularly been effective. And this is something, if you go back and listen to kind of their messaging throughout the last week, this is something they worked at extensively in the offseason. Like, Herbert went back, broke down essentially, all of his protections last year kind of against the blitz, and studied, okay, how do I everything that went right basically, and everything that he went wrong and he could have corrected. And you're seeing it through, these first couple of weeks so far. And they have such a good, and, Jeff Legwold of ESPN, great, terrific guy that he is, broke down and asked, Sean this past week about the Chargers run so much just kind of heavy personnel looks, and then we'll run play action out of that. So it becomes just impossible to kind of dissect, what they're doing. They've been so effective. I think Justin Herbert has thrown for more yards than any other quarterback at a play action situation so far. Don't fact check me on that. I'm pretty sure. But they've been, they have so many options, because especially against the blitz, they have got, Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen can get open underneath like that. And their offensive line, they handled the Raiders, they handled Max Crosby really well last week. So this is, Zach Allen essentially said on Monday, like, he's not worried about the pass rush. And, I don't think anyone should be. They have a very, they have a track record. At the same time, though, I think they blitzed on like 71% of dropbacks against Daniel Jones. Technically, Troy, to your point, that's not an all-out Mad Dog situation, but that's and they only got home once at the end of the day, and that's that's something that just is not a recipe for success. And so I do think, I've been looking and kind of talking and writing about this sort of death lineup dime package that they can assemble, with, again, Pat Surtain, Riley Moss, Jaquan McMillan, and Jahdae Barron. I think they need to deploy it, in specific situations. I think they need to make the Chargers run the ball effectively because they haven't done it yet.
Right.
They're averaging 3.4 yards a carry. And obviously, if they are running the ball well, that opens up the play action game. If they can make things a little bit more one-dimensional, it makes things a whole lot easier. So I'd like to see Jahdae Barron more, in this game with the complement of receivers that the Chargers have. I don't, watching back on tape, he hasn't made a lot of glaring mistakes through a couple of weeks. He had a PBU last week in only 16 snaps. And obviously the Broncos are trying to find ways for him to play. I think, I called for it last week. I think he needs a little bit more time in week 3. So, but overall, I'd agree with you, Troy. I think your assessment of what needs to happen is fairly apt.
Yeah, I just don't like the chances of blitzing Herbert right now. He's just on a heater, and the way you lose the game at SoFi is giving up touchdowns, not field goals. For me, if you're going to beat this Harbaugh team, you got to kind of play with their style with them a little bit, grind it out, make them go the length of the field, and try to win the red zone and win a 2017 type game, 23-20 type game. You get into a shootout. It's just typically those games are hard to win on the road unless you have Breeze, Manning, Brady, like great quarterbacks win shootouts on the road. Typically the middle of the pack quarterback, and that's where Bo is right now. Those are hard games to win on the road. I mean, when you're talking about, we're going to score 33 on the road, really? I mean, that's what you do with a guy who's, first team, second team all pro. And the other thing about this game, and the reason why I say that, like make them go the distance and kind of get into the muck with them, roll around with the pigs and the slop, is stay disciplined. Last year in 2 games, Broncos, if memory serves, my research yesterday, they had 14 penalties against the Chargers. Chargers had 5. They don't beat themselves. I think they only got 1 turnover from them. So, like, you play it, keep it in front of you, tackle well, and then my recipe for them to win would be that the penalties are similar, and that when you look up at the end of the day, Broncos have 2 takeaways and the Chargers have 1. And you win a close game that way. But it's hard to turn them over. But you did identify something. If they can make them one-dimensional, that could be, if you take out the run game and Hampton and Najee Harris are just not effective, then maybe it loosens stuff up where you take a chance with a corner blitz or a safety blitz or a Sternad blitz. That's how they beat the Jets, frankly, last year in an ugly-ass game, 10-9. Mm-hmm. And this, for me, is a statement-type game. This is where they were, Luca, last year. I know you weren't on the beat. They were 0-2, and they go to Tampa, and Tampa's coming off a huge game where they played well. I think either beat the Lions or played them great. And, like, the Broncos have no chance in Tampa based on what they had shown against the Steelers and Seahawks. And that was the best game they've played under Sean Payton for me. Mm-hmm. And defensively, it was pick, it was I think they produced turnovers in the first 2. They drove down and scored and had 2 turnovers the first 2 drives. I'm not saying they'd have that, but that's kind of that formula, is make the Chargers chase you a little bit, but you're making them go the distance. And I don't know if they're capable of doing that. That Bucs line that day was a mess, and Denver ended up with like 7 sacks because Tampa Bay couldn't protect. That won't happen. My concern is they stop the run, and then Herbert rushes for 70 anytime they go to man and turn their back on him. But there is a path to win, don't you think? I mean, we say this and we're pessimistic partly because I'm just so frustrated with how the end of that game against the Colts that you just gave it away with just a unreal decision. But don't you still see a path to an upset, even if it's unlikely?
Absolutely. I mean, I think I think for one, there's been a lot of conversation through a couple of weeks from Bo Nix himself, really, about the balance between being aggressive. And I think there's a really interesting conversation in here about, man, if you have a defense like this, do you play a little bit more conservatively at times as a quarterback, knowing that they're so good that you don't want to put them in a bad position? Or do you play a little bit more aggressive and take shots knowing that, hey, my defense can back me up? They did that in week 1, and they couldn't do it essentially in week 2. Obviously, Bo Nix had a great game, but fourth quarter interception was a little bit of a killer at the time. I think the recipe for him this week really like you said, Troy, they can't afford to have turnovers and giveaways in this game. And Bo Nix has 4 through a couple of games overall. And, I really think that he has to play smart and be a little bit more of a game manager in this one. I don't think you necessarily win with home run off platform stuff against Jim Harbaugh's Chargers necessarily, especially because this Los Angeles defense, like they go heavy nickel, heavy dime, especially heavy dime a lot of the time, and they'll go light box. And this brings us to, I know another one of our main topics today, Troy, but I think J.K. Dobbins, he's got a little something extra in his back pocket, for tucked away for this one. We'll see how it manifests, but I think there's a real opportunity here for him to do some damage, because the Chargers, they play a light box a lot of the time, again, because they play, so many DBs and they can do so many things with Derwin James. But there's a chance for J.K. Dobbins to get a little momentum. He's a guy like he wants this win. I talked to him in the locker room yesterday, and he's always a guy that plays with a chip on his shoulder. He said, I'm always a guy that, I'm always going to have a chip on my shoulder, but he wants a win this week, and we can get into why.
Yeah, he doesn't have a chip on his shoulder this week. He's got the whole bag of Doritos. He's pissed. I mean, they did him a little dirty the way the free agency went down. He was really good for them last year, first 11, 12 weeks of the season. He had, I think, 95, 96 yards rushing against the Broncos in the win when the Chargers beat. And the Chargers dominated that game, frankly. I mean, it was comical. Through the 3 quarters, they dominated Denver. The score looked close. The game wasn't close. Now, the game in L.A., I thought Denver should have won, and Peyton got cute at the end of the game, into the half. They end up with this weird field goal thing with Jim Harbaugh thinking he invented football, and they gave him momentum, and they end up losing the game. So, but Dobbins has a chip, and it's funny you bring up, this light box. When I covered, this is how old I am, that when I covered the Broncos championship teams of 97, 98 with Mike Shanahan and Terrell Davis, if you played one high safety light box, like if you played the light box against them, they were personally insulted. Like every time light box, we're going to run it down your throat until we stop you. And that's what I loved about that team. Is like they would run 4 or 5 straight times. They don't care. Sean, he'll go 7 on first down, and then, here comes 3 wide. Like, he's got to stay committed to it. Like, again, get in the slop with the pigs a little bit here. If JK is having a day and he's on a heater, feed him. Get him, because he's definitely got some juice for this game. And the Chargers are a little vulnerable there. And so if the idea is Sean stays stubborn and we're going to win it with Bo throwing 38 times, I don't like their chances. If it's Bo going 22 for 30, for 230 and a touchdown and no turnovers, I think you can win that way, because that would mean, Luca, you're watching history, the first 100-yard rusher for the Broncos since Sean Payton took over. There hasn't been one. There was a chance.
That's crazy.
Last week he was starting to sniff the number, but if J.K. Dobbins gets to 100, I believe they win, because it controls the clock. Because the other thing in those 2 games last year, the Chargers dominated the time of possession. In the first game, they won the time of possession by like 14 minutes. Yeah, I mean, you can't win that way. But Dobbins could be an answer with a little splice of Harvey, but it just feels like, this guy, he's on fire. He wants this. Now, sometimes that can lead to a turnover. It's the old, you want to play with emotion, but don't be emotional. But doesn't it feel like Dobbins has got this kind of game in him?
Absolutely. And I got a story coming out on him on Sunday on sort of the rebirth. He has had one of the most unique careers, really, of any guy in the league at this point. Blew out his knee, blew out his Achilles, missed so much time, and he was this guy in high school and at Ohio State. Like, he was the next thing, he was a guy. He averaged 6 yards a carry his first year in Baltimore. Like, the future was there for him. And then now, the year he had in LA last year, coming off all that was pretty incredible because guys don't, I talked to Lou Yenny, running backs coach, yesterday, and he was like, Achilles, like that's a death sentence in this league for backs, and Dobbins has survived, and every step of the way, it's like just another more fuel to the fire, and then all of a sudden you come into week 3 against a Chargers team, and I go into this in the story, but let's break this down a little bit because it's really interesting how everything transpires, this offseason. But the Broncos wanted JK from, day one, free agency. Like they reached out to him on day one. There was always kind of a conversation there, and essentially the plan, as I understood it back from JK's camp, was like, kind of set their own market. He obviously didn't go sign in that initial kind of free agency period. And at that point, you're looking towards, okay, what teams need running backs as training camp, progresses and guys get hurt and what have you. So they had time to kind of sit a little bit. The Chargers go out, they sign Najee Harris day one, take Amari and Hampton in April. And at that point, you're like, well, there's no way that J.K. Dobbins goes back. Late April, they put a tender on him.
Right.
So you can't, you got to sign with a team by mid-July, essentially, or you're going to make a little over $1 million this year on a 1-year deal, and you got to come back and play in LA. So this accelerates the timeline, essentially. Obviously ends up in Denver in June, but there's, I guess externally, we don't really know what's the Chargers are, the decision-making there, but externally it's strange business, just how everything kind of transpired there. I think even JK said, in his first time coming to Denver, like it was a little weird,
why do it? Cause it didn't look like they needed him.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's like, if sometimes
didn't look like they wanted him or
is it
or needed him.
Are you trying to limit his market and you just want to keep him? Like that reminded me of an old recruiting thing, or we're going to just sign him so he can't go somewhere else, but we don't really need him.
It almost
like really odd.
Yeah. And so that all plays out. He's here in Denver, and I think he was in a scrum yesterday. He said pretty much all the right things, but he's gonna have a chip on his shoulder like when that happens. And he's a guy, he's gonna take every single piece, every single ounce of motivation he can. Like he plays with an edge. That's one thing this locker room loves about him, and him coming in, he brings an edge to the offense that frankly when you look at the makeup of a lot of guys in this room, there's competitiveness, but there's no, he came out in training camp and is talking crap to Malcolm Roach, a weekend. And they like that. Jonathan Cooper loves that. Like the offensive line loves that. They love a back who's got some fire to him. So I'd imagine we'd see that fire a little bit in week 3. And then, to tie this up to your point, Troy, if they trust RJ Harvey, I'd imagine there's a little bit of opportunity for him in this one because Khalil Mack, obviously the Charger star, is out. RJ Harvey obviously has the opportunity to bounce things outside and this or that. So I'm guessing we see a little bit of change of pace for him. And if he gets going, that really opens up the dynamic of this game. So a lot of interesting outcomes with the ground game, again, if Sean Payton sticks to it.
Yeah, Sean Payton's done a lot of remarkable stuff in two and a half years here.
Yep.
But he has never shown an ability to trust the run game. He just doesn't. And it's just there's a gravitational pull for him to throw the football. He wants to win, and he wants to win a certain way. And I just think he struggles with the idea that you could literally run the football 5-6 times in a row. Because he got all these plays on that Waffle House menu sheet that he wants to get to, and running the same play 4 or 5 times in the row prevents that. I mean, how am I going to get to my fourth quarter special pass plays if I'm running all the time? And I just think he's really got to lean into kind of who they are, because they need something to hang their hat on. And we'll leave it with that. Like, if they were to win, what would you like them to walk away from hanging their hat on being 2-1 going into Cincinnati. What would you think? A win would be, need not apologize how you would get it, because they've had very little success at SoFi. But they had won one game 2 years ago with Sean, with Russell Wilson. But that's when Brandon Staley was going south. I mean, it was just the Chargers were terrible. They were in the 1-2-3 Cancun mode by that time. But what would you like to see them be able to hang their hat on
Yep.
when they leave this game? Maybe even if it's a close loss, but what would you like to see how that develops and evolves, Luca?
Yeah, Parker and I have talked about, and I've brought this up on our podcast over with the Post, but it doesn't feel like the Broncos have had a cohesive offensive identity whatsoever through these first couple of weeks, even though they've still put up points here and there. And Parker made the point that they really, they haven't really had that through Sean Payton's tenure, and obviously you have new weapons, you have new pieces here. I think you started to see a little bit formulate last week too, right? Like, Troy, to your point, Sean obviously is, not historically, or at least here in Denver, certainly kind of consistently, but he came out in week 2, runs three straight plays for J.K. Dobbins, and that's, and it pops. And I think you have a situation where, okay, let's try and get JK going. Let's have him be the opener, essentially. And think of this in baseball terms. Like, let's have him be the opener and the closer.
Yep.
That's kind of, first quarter, fourth quarter, second and third quarter, you sprinkle in some RJ Harvey, maybe even you sprinkle some Tyler Bidet in on third downs, safety valve. But again, ground game, open things up for Bo Nix, have him, the connection is growing there with Troy Franklin, obviously Cortland Sutton, not a huge impact week 2, but he'll be there, have sort of take a little bit of the pressure off of Bo and have him be able to spray the ball around a little bit. I think that's, where in a situation where J.K. Dobbins is, where you're leaning on him to both open and close, I think that's kind of the ideal plan. And then obviously defensively, you need to make a statement, I think. And, it's on the header there, but you need to make a statement. The pass rush needs to get home. There's in one-on-ones, they need to win that this week. And so, but yeah, I think that offensive identity, I think it starts with Dobbins this week, kind of leading the show.
Yeah, I agree. Physically, just kind of an old school, bare knuckle, throw the sawdust down, be willing to win a close game. And you look up at the end and it's, you get a strip sack, you get a field goal, you win a close game.
Yep.
Because if the idea is to win with both throwing 35 to 40 times, they're not winning a game like that. And I'll eat my words if they do. I just don't see that as a path to victory. I see a path to victory with you rush for, not necessarily one guy, it'd be nice, but you rush for 125, 130 yards. You control the time, kind of control the time of possession, or at least be neutral there. And then your defense, if it's a special defense, comes up with a big pick or a strip sack. We can't talk about this defense in special terms without them doing special things. It doesn't work that way. At some point, if you're a great defense, you beat the Chargers on the road. When I covered the team in 2015, the quarterbacks they beat that year, Luca, were Roethlisberger, Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, Matthew Stafford, Phillip Rivers. I mean, guys with clear cases for the Hall of Fame. And they didn't beat them. They embarrassed them in most cases. So if you're going to be a team and a great defense, you go out and you beat Herbert, who's playing out of his mind. So, again, this is what comes with expectation. They created them. And these are the games you live up to them, where your coach can then pound his chest and say, see, I told you guys, this is why we're a Super Bowl contender. And you would be if you beat the Chargers. You lose this game, now you're, again, chasing ghosts and lightning bolts for several weeks.
Yeah, if to your point, Troy, if Daniel Jones is coming out and throw, he looks reborn in that offense. But if he's coming out and throwing for 300 yards on you, you can't say it. You cannot. I don't think you can call yourself a special defense if Daniel Jones is throwing for 300 plus yards on you. So And Justin Herbert, I think this is a real. This is it's an inflection point kind of at this point in the year. It's
great way to put it.
It's on one end of the barrel, you're staring down at 2-1. Frankly, should have been 3-0, and you're sitting pretty because there's been kinks all over the place, and yet your head's squarely above water. The other hand, you're 1-2, and you're in a hole in the division already, and and problems you have to fix that your record indicates. So it's a tough one.
I'm looking forward to it. Should be a good game. Yep. Again, they haven't played historically well there. It'll never be worse than the Christmas Day game. So we got that going for us, Luca. And it won't be that Patrick from SpongeBob going, oh, as Russell Wilson throws an interception to Bobby Wagner because he's still using the same audibles he did in Seattle. It won't be that. So we got that going for us. But I'm looking forward to it. I know you're looking forward to going back to LA. I always enjoy the trip to SoCal, the extra hours sleep, the weather. It's fantastic this time of year. I couldn't do this program without Ted Shih and his family law practice, Darby Hoggatt of Hoggatt Injury Law, of course, Danny Bailey behind the screen and the board, and Nate Lundy of Mile High Sports. Luca Evans, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back on Monday to break it all down, the Broncos v. Chargers in what is a monstrous game in Week 3. Broncos country, I do this pod for you. Happiness, that begins with me. Go out there and have a great day.